Our next speaker is Shelly McClanahan, and Shelly is a middle school learning support specialist at ACS Egham, and she's going to be talking about her work with helping students engage with their identity language in English literature classes. So, Shelly.
Hi. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about how I came to work with English language learners. I started teaching a long time ago in a small town in Tennessee. It's a very rural area. Everyone speaks English, no one speaks anything else. And then one day, a little Korean girl showed up in my classroom, and she spent the entire day crying. She only spoke English, or Korean, she didn't speak anything else, and I didn't know what to do with her. I didn't know how to help her. But I did what I could. I worked with her one-on-one, and I used the Rosetta Stone program. But that experience was my first visit into the world of English language learners, and I found it to be a challenging and interesting world. So I obtained my ESL certification, and I've been working with English language learners ever since. During my time as an ELL teacher, I've been able to see a lot of student success, but I've also seen a lot of the challenges that they face. Among these are becoming literate in English, which takes not only the ability to decode words and understand vocabulary, but also the cultural knowledge that is embedded in texts. I often see students struggling with texts and asking questions that are not related to their level of English, but to some other cultural aspect, such as the understanding of idioms or common English sayings that don't directly translate into other languages. I wanted to do something to help my students make that jump in their understanding, and that's why I developed this project. So my question for this project was, how will using native language texts in language and literacy classes with middle school EAL students improve their vocabulary, class participation, and comprehension of the text? The intervention that I used was providing students with a native language text version of the text that had been assigned in their language and literacy class. I hoped that giving students this scaffold would help them understand the deeper meanings within the text, as they would have the cultural knowledge in that language to grasp those meanings. I also hoped that students would make language transfer, as they would be writing and having class discussions in English. Finally, I hope that this would make students feel more confident when taking part in class discussions, because they would have the same experience that their native English-speaking counterparts had had, that of reading a text in their native language. Catherine Copeland produced a very informative literature review on my topic that outlines the problems that ELLs face. The review made the point that using a student's native language, or L1, can be beneficial on many levels and is in fact already being done in many different ways, from bilingual school programs to content language integrated learning, which is also known as CLIL, and projects like the one I'm discussing now. I want to share with you a few quotes from the review. Coelho states that students who see their previously developed language skills acknowledged by their teachers and parents are also more likely to feel confident and to take the risks involved in learning in their new school environment. They are able to view English as an addition to their first language rather than a replacement. Harklaw states, studies show that multilingual adolescents' engagement and motivation in school-based literacy tasks are key to learning. Copeland herself said, by using a student's stronger L1, we are creating a value and use for their existing literacy skills. Exposure to and using texts in their first language gives them the possibility of accessing content and grasp the instructions whilst they acquire new vocabulary and literacy skills in the second language as well. Cummins writes that students' heritage language and proficiency can become a resource for learning English rather than being viewed as either irrelevant or an impediment. The final picture presented here in the literature review is that of using native languages as a tool rather than viewing them as an impediment. This is known as additive bilingualism. In this school of thought, we view bilingualism as a glass that is half full. For this project, the method was simple: to provide students with a copy of a text in their native language alongside an English version. Students were allowed to read in both copies as they chose. Afterwards, both teachers and students were asked to give feedback about the process via surveys and interviews. I also conducted classroom observations and collected WIDA scores and work samples. To begin the intervention, I first had to find the native language versions of the books students were reading in their language and literature classes. This proved to be the trickiest part of the entire project. Titles often do not get directly translated, and sometimes they get completely changed. For example, when I tried to find the Dutch version of the novel Hatchet by Gary Paulson, I found that I had to look for Survival in the Wilderness or Overleven in the Wilderness. My students coached me on how to say that, and if you speak Dutch, I apologize, because they laughed at me every time I said it. I often had the students themselves help me locate a book, since I was searching on websites in languages that I could not read. Sometimes I could find a copy of a novel in a language I was searching for, only to discover that the publisher did not ship to the UK. When we finally had copies of the novels, they were distributed to students. The students were allowed to use them in the way that they felt they needed. Some students read both the English and native language copy. Some read the native language copy and used English in class for work and discussions, and some read the English copy and used the native language copy only for chapters or passages that they found difficult to read. During class time, they participated in discussions in English, and all work was completed in English. Overall, reading texts in native languages seemed to be a positive thing. Although I'm still parsing through the data, I've already learned some interesting things from interviewing the students. The students talked about both the benefits and the challenges of reading in their native language. There were some issues that students reported that can now be remedied now that we have encountered them and we know that they are coming. One challenge noted by students was that of identifying literary techniques, because what appears as a metaphor or alliteration in English may not be translated as such when it's in another language. One sixth grader said, the thing I found a bit bad about reading in Spanish only was when we were working on one of those writing techniques. In Spanish, these words are different. For example, the teacher would say, when the author uses a metaphor in chapter 8, and I was like, what's a metaphor? Because it's the same, but they say it differently. Many other students made similar comments. Students also noted it was difficult to find quotes to support their points when writing or discussing a text. A ninth grade student said, when we were preparing for the IOC, it was much harder to collect quotes because you couldn't say them in Hungarian. However, in the end, there were more positive comments mentioned than challenges. I'll share a few more quotes with you from students. A sixth grade student said, I felt like I was reading in English because everyone knew the same thing from the book, because when we talked about it in class, it was all the same. A seventh grade student said, I had to understand it, so you gave me the book in German, so I understood what we had to do and I could do my work. Another seventh grader said, when I read my English books, I understand what every sentence means, but when I finish the book, I don't know what the book was talking about. But when I read in Chinese, I know the meaning of the book. A couple of students even said that reading in their native language made them feel special, there was two different kids said that. Students also talked about the ease of reading in their native language versus English. A seventh grader said, when I forgot my German book, I read it in English and I had to read a sentence like 2 or 3 times. A sixth grader said, when I read the book in English, I sometimes had to read the whole page again because sometimes things didn't make sense. Another seventh grader said, when I read in English, I need to translate to Chinese and it is difficult to read. So sometimes I would think, what does a sentence mean in Chinese? Although the students felt this helped them, many of them said that next year they would prefer to read in English only, as they believe their skills have advanced enough to allow them to do that. The insight that I gained from this project is that students are able to use their native language to enhance their understanding of English language texts. In other words, they are able to use this as a tool and not a crutch. In the future, I would construct this intervention in a more managed way, focusing on certain chapters of text that would need more direct instruction, and I would do more specific co-planning with classroom teachers. I would like to finish with a final quote from Catherine Copeland. She says, Research points to the social benefits of teachers and peers using a student's L1. Providing value to students L1 through novel study in their mother tongue, along with giving them some confidence to achieve, is perhaps one of the strongest arguments for implementing dual language texts in literacy learning and other content-based classes. Thank you.